Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Collins. I am 26, and if I am being honest, I have been carrying responsibilities that were never mine to begin with since I was 15. My mom remarried when I was still in high school to a man named Greg. He already had two younger kids from his first marriage, Ellie, who is now 10, and Jacob, who is 8. From the very beginning, Greg and I never really got along. He made it very clear to me early on that I was, in his words, my mom's responsibility, while his children were his real family. That was his favorite way to draw a line between us, as if I were an outsider living in their house instead of part of the family. But the funny thing was, whenever it came time for errands, household chores, or money, suddenly I was expected to step in like a second parent. It was as if he wanted the benefit of another adult in the house without actually acknowledging me as part of the family unit. Fast forward to last week. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment that I pay for completely on my own. I have a full-time job at a marketing firm, and I also do freelance design work on the side. I drive a 2015 Ford Escape that I worked for years to afford, and every dime of my living expenses comes out of my own pocket. I do not ask anyone for help, I do not lean on family for money, and I am proud of that independence. Meanwhile, my mom and Greg live in a big house in the suburbs, a house that is mostly kept afloat by my mom's salary. Greg has a decent job in construction management, but he is careless with money. He is constantly upgrading his fishing boat, buying the latest gaming systems for his kids, or taking them to amusement parks. He is the type of man who wants to look like a provider, while someone else quietly covers the essentials. That someone has always been my mom, who handles the mortgage, groceries, and most of the household bills. That brings me to what happened this morning. My mom asked me if I could come over to help her move some boxes into the garage. I was tired from working all week, but I agreed, because I have always been the helpful one. After we finished carrying the boxes, she casually dropped a bomb on me. She said, "Oh, starting Monday, you'll be babysitting Ellie and Jacob while Greg and I go on vacation in Florida." At first, I actually laughed because I thought it had to be a joke. I said something like, "Mom, I have a job. I cannot just drop everything to watch your stepkids for a week." But she looked dead serious, and before she could even respond, Greg chimed in from the kitchen. He said, "You'll do it. You need to learn some respect. Consider this part of being family." That was when it hit me. They were not asking me, they were ordering me, as if I had no say in the matter. What made it worse was the entitlement in their tone. They expected me to provide unpaid childcare for two kids I did not really have a strong bond with, while they went off to blow thousands of dollars on a vacation I was not even invited to. Later, my mom let slip that they had booked 5 nights at a Disney resort. Anyone who has ever looked at those prices knows that the rooms alone can run $400 a night, not including tickets, food, or souvenirs. They were easily spending $5,000 on this trip, yet they wanted to act like I was selfish for saying I could not provide free babysitting. That afternoon, instead of getting angry or causing a scene, I decided I was going to teach them both a lesson. I politely texted my mom and said, "Sure, I'll think about it. Let me check my schedule." But in reality, I was making other plans. I started looking into local babysitting agencies and daycare services just to see what professional childcare would cost for 2 kids over 5 days. The average quote I got back was about $20 an hour. If you calculate that for 8 hours a day, 5 days straight, that comes out to $800. I took screenshots of a couple of the estimates and kept them saved. On Monday morning, I showed up at their house right before they were about to leave for the airport. They were in that chaotic rush you get into when you are about to travel. Suitcases in the hallway, kids half-dressed, everyone stressed. I walked in carrying a folder. I handed it to my mom and Greg, and inside was a typed invoice. It read, "Childcare services for Ellie, 10, and Jacob, 8, 5 days, 8 hours per day, $20 per hour, total $800. Payment due in advance." My mom's jaw literally dropped when she saw it. Greg immediately started yelling at me, calling me greedy and disrespectful. I stayed calm and said, "I love you, Mom, but I work full-time. If you want me to cover childcare, you can pay me like you would pay anyone else." That only set Greg off further. He said, "You're supposed to be part of this family." "We don't pay family." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Funny, because when you go to Disney, you pay for Ellie and Jacob's tickets, their meals, and their souvenirs. Family or not, money still matters. You don't get to treat me like the help without offering compensation." Then I grabbed my bag and walked out, leaving them scrambling. Later that day, I got a flood of texts from my mom. She said things like, "Just help for once," and "The kids are crying. They do not understand why you won't step up." I stuck to my guns and told her, "I am available if you want to arrange proper payment. Otherwise, you will need to find someone else." She tried to guilt me with lines like, "You know we cannot afford this right now," but the irony of that statement was almost laughable, considering they had just dropped thousands of dollars on a Disney trip. In the end, they had no choice. None of their friends could step in on such short notice, and every professional childcare service in the area was fully booked. They ended up having to cancel their trip entirely. My mom has barely spoken to me since, but I feel like I finally made a point. I'm not their backup plan. About a week after the whole Disney trip fiasco, I was at my apartment catching up on freelance work when I heard a knock at the door. I was not expecting anyone, and when I opened it, I saw my mom standing there alone. She looked exhausted in a way I had not seen before, not just physically but emotionally. Her shoulders were slumped, her eyes puffy, and she carried herself like someone who had been holding too much inside for too long. She did not bring Greg, and she did not bring the kids. It was just her, which already told me this was not going to be a casual visit. She came in quietly, sat down on my couch, and for a few minutes just stared at the floor as if she was trying to figure out how to start. Then she finally told me that canceling the trip had cost them almost $2,000 in nonrefundable deposits. The way she said it was almost apologetic, like she knew I had nothing to do with their poor planning, but she still needed to unload the weight of it. She admitted that Greg blamed me for the loss and had been sulking and complaining ever since. But then she surprised me by saying that she realized they had put me in an unfair position. Hearing her say that was something I never expected, because usually she took Greg's side in front of me. I asked her why she thought it was ever okay to demand that I drop my life and watch 2 kids for free, as if my job and my independence did not matter. She sat there twisting her hands and finally admitted that Greg pressured her into it. According to her, he framed it as, "Your daughter owes us respect after all we've done for her." When she repeated that phrase out loud, she actually winced, as if hearing it spoken outside the heat of the moment made her realize how manipulative it sounded. I could not hold back from asking what exactly they thought they had done for me, because from where I stood most of the sacrifices had been hers, not his. She got quiet, almost like I had said the one thing she had been avoiding admitting to herself. After a long pause, she confessed that she often feels like Greg favors his own kids over me, and that when it comes to the household, it is usually her carrying the heavy load while he spends freely on things that make him look like a good father. She said she tries to convince herself that it is just the way blended families are, but deep down she knows it is not fair, and that she has been excusing his behavior for years. There was something about the way she said it that struck me. It was not defensive, and it was not an excuse this time. It sounded like someone finally peeling back the layers and acknowledging a truth they had been burying for years. She admitted that she feels taken for granted, not only by Greg, but by the kids sometimes too, because Greg sets the tone and makes her sacrifices invisible. Hearing her say that was jarring, because for the first time in a long time it felt like we were on the same side, like she saw through him instead of shielding him. It was the first time she really opened up about her doubts. 2 months after my mom came to my apartment and admitted she felt taken for granted, the tension in the family had not just lingered, it had escalated into something impossible to ignore. At first, I thought Greg would eventually let the Disney situation die down, but he did the opposite. Instead of moving on, he found subtle ways to bring it up and turn it into a running joke at my expense. Whenever we had family dinners, whether it was a Sunday cookout or a birthday gathering, he would drop some snide comment in front of everyone. It started small, like him making a fake cough and muttering, "Careful, Amanda charges by the hour," if I passed him a plate. Other times, if one of the kids asked me to help them with homework or set the table, he would smirk and say, "Don't expect her to lift a finger unless you wave cash in her face." At first, I tried to ignore him. I told myself that feeding into it would only give him more satisfaction, so I would roll my eyes or redirect the conversation. But ignoring someone like Greg is like feeding them fuel. He mistook my silence for weakness, and the comments got nastier. It became his favorite way to get a laugh at family gatherings, and even though some people chuckled awkwardly, most of the room would go quiet because they could tell there was venom behind it. My mom would usually try to change the subject, but she never called him out directly in front of everyone, which made me feel like I was standing alone. The breaking point came at one of those dinners when we were all sitting around the table. Greg made another one of his digs, this time saying, "Well, don't bother asking Amanda for help unless you've got a checkbook handy." I felt the heat rise in my face, and before I could stop myself, I snapped back. I looked straight at him and said, "Don't expect me to raise your kids for free while you blow money on boats and Disney." The words came out sharp, louder than I intended, and the entire table went dead silent. You could have heard a fork drop. Greg froze, his smirk gone in an instant, and for once he had no comeback. The silence stretched uncomfortably until someone nervously cleared their throat and tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. My mom's face was pale, and I could see her trying to hold herself together in front of everyone. Dinner carried on in awkward silence, but you could feel the tension crackling like static in the air. I left soon after, not wanting to stick around for whatever explosion was brewing. A few hours later, I got a call from my younger half-brother, Tyler. For context, Tyler is 14, from my mom's first marriage with my dad, before Greg ever came into the picture. He still lives at home, and he is the type who keeps his head down most of the time, so him calling me out of the blue was unusual. He sounded shaken, but also a little giddy, like he had just overheard something big. He told me that after I left, Mom and Greg had gotten into a massive fight. Apparently, the second the guests were gone, Greg started yelling about how I disrespected him, and Mom finally snapped. Tyler said he had never heard her yell at him like that before. She told Greg she was sick of being the only one paying bills, and that she was tired of him acting like he was some big provider when in reality she was carrying the family on her back. Tyler said she did not stop there. She brought up how unfair it was that Greg constantly favored Ellie and Jacob while dismissing me and even Tyler himself, as if the only people who mattered in the household were his biological kids. According to Tyler, she said outright that she was considering separating because she could not keep living like this, financially or emotionally. When Tyler repeated those words to me, I nearly dropped my phone. Hearing my mom say something like that felt surreal. For years, she had been Greg's defender. Anytime I pointed out his favoritism or irresponsibility, she would brush it off with lines like, "He means well," or "That's just how he is." She always took the role of mediator, bending over backward to keep the peace, even when it meant ignoring her own exhaustion. To hear that she not only argued with him, but actually threatened separation was like seeing a crack form in a wall I thought was indestructible. It was even more shocking because of the timing. My mom is not impulsive. She is the type who endures and endures until she cannot anymore. The Disney fiasco must have been the tipping point. Losing thousands of dollars and watching her husband blame me instead of taking accountability had forced her to look at the bigger picture. It was no longer just about one canceled trip or one fight. It was about years of imbalance, years of sacrifice on her end, and years of Greg pretending to be the head of the household when the truth was that he was more like an extra dependent. When I hung up with Tyler, I sat in silence for a long time, trying to process it. I had spent so many years thinking my mom would always defend Greg no matter what, that she would always find a way to excuse his behavior. To hear that she openly admitted she was sick of being the only one paying the bills, and that she was actually considering separation, left me stunned. I was stunned because Mom always defended him, but I think the Disney fiasco cracked something open. Last week, I got another call from Mom, and this one felt different. Her voice wasn't weighed down the way it usually is. Instead, there was this quiet determination running through it. She told me she's been secretly setting aside money in her own account for months and recently started looking at smaller apartments. She said she's seriously thinking about leaving Greg. What stunned me most was when she admitted that my refusal to give in to their babysitting stunt gave her courage. She said watching me handle myself financially, managing my own apartment and career, made her realize she didn't have to keep carrying him. For years, I've watched her be the one stretching her paycheck, picking up extra shifts, and sacrificing things she wanted just to keep the household afloat while Greg spent money on his kids, vacations, and projects that always seemed to matter more than anything she needed. She had convinced herself it was just the price of marriage, but now, for the first time, she was openly saying she deserved better. Hearing that shook me because I've been waiting for her to recognize her own strength. Word has spread through the family that Greg is furious. According to my aunt, he's been loudly telling anyone who will listen that I destroyed his marriage. He paints himself as the victim, claiming that everything started falling apart only after I refused to do my part. But I don't feel guilty. In fact, I feel relieved. For so long, the narrative was that I was the selfish one for not bending over backwards whenever he demanded it. Now the cracks in his version of reality are showing, and people are starting to realize who was actually carrying the weight all along. The irony is that my step-siblings, Ellie and Jacob, don't even see me as the villain. They're still kids, but from the little I hear through extended family, they've noticed the way their dad is always angry and always blaming someone else. That blame used to be directed squarely at me, but now they're starting to question why he never takes responsibility for anything. In a strange way, I feel like standing my ground planted a seed, not just for my mom, but for them too. As for me, I finally feel like I accomplished what I set out to do. When Greg smugly told me they'd teach me respect by forcing me to watch his kids for free, I knew I had to push back, even if it made me the villain in their story. What I didn't expect was that it would ripple outward like this. Mom is finally putting herself first. She's thinking about her future instead of only his. And for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm carrying guilt for setting boundaries. Instead, I feel proud. If Greg wants to call it marriage-ending sabotage, that's his problem. I see it as a wake-up call that was long overdue. My time, my energy, and my respect are worth something, and by standing firm, I showed Mom hers are too. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It really helps the channel grow.